She does not chase. She does not beg. She does not send the third message when the second one went unanswered. And the most extraordinary thing about her is not what she does. It is what she says. Because when she speaks, something in the room shifts. The energy changes. The man across from her suddenly realizes he is not dealing with someone who needs his approval, who is waiting for his validation, who has organized her worth around whether or not he decides to stay. And that realization changes everything about how he behaves, how he speaks, how he shows up. Carl Jung spent 50 years studying the psychology of the human interior, and what he discovered about the women who command the deepest respect, who attract the highest quality of love and connection, who move through relationships with a quality of peace that most people never achieve, was not what most people expect. It was not their appearance, not their status, not how perfectly they performed the role of the ideal woman. It was something far more interior, far more durable, far more rare. Their relationship with themselves. And today, we are going to show you exactly what Carl Jung found, and exactly how the women who have integrated his teaching speak to men, think about men, handle men in a way that produces something most relationships never produce: real, lasting, deeply mutual respect. Stay until the very end, because the final principle in this video is the one that changes not just how you speak, but who you become when you speak it. There is a kind of woman you have encountered, maybe briefly, maybe in a way that you still think about, not because she was the most beautiful in the room, not because she was the most impressive, but because of something that had no name, but was unmistakable. She was present in a way that most people are not, fully inhabiting herself, not performing herself, not managing how she appeared to the people watching, not monitoring the room for signs of whether she was being received correctly. Just there, complete. And every word she spoke carried a weight that words from other people do not carry. Not because she was louder, because she was rooted. Jung called this individuation, the process of becoming fully and completely yourself, not the self the world wanted you to be, not the self that emerged from accommodating other people's comfort and expectations. The actual self, the one that exists beneath every performance and every adaptation, and every version of yourself you have deployed to make other people more comfortable. And when a woman has done this work, when she has completed enough of this process to know who she actually is, independent of anyone else's confirmation of it, the way she speaks to men changes fundamentally, irreversibly. And the men around her feel it before she says a word. The first thing that changes when a woman knows her worth is the most basic unit of communication: the sentence. Listen to the difference between these two statements. Why do you never call me? And I value consistent communication. Both say the same thing. On the surface, both are responding to the same gap in the relationship, but they come from completely different places. The first comes from fear, from the aching need for reassurance that is barely disguised as a question. It is asking, do I matter to you? Please confirm that I matter. The second comes from something else entirely. From the settled knowledge of what she values. Stated simply. Without desperation. Without the trembling underneath. That makes a statement into a plea. And the man who receives them processes them completely differently. The first activates his avoidance response. The specific neurological signal that says pressure, demand, withdrawal is available and might feel easier than staying. The second activates something else. Respect. The specific recognition that this person knows what they want and is not afraid to say it clearly, and knows equally clearly that whether you provide it is your choice, but whether she stays, if you do not, is hers. That is the language of a woman who has done the inner work, and you cannot fake it. It only sounds that way when it is actually true. Carl Jung said, "The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are, not who you perform, not who you accommodate others into letting you be who you actually are." And the journey to that place runs directly through the thing most people spend their entire lives avoiding: their shadow. The parts of themselves they have decided are unacceptable. The anger that does not fit the image of the warm, agreeable woman the world has been asking for. The need that does not fit the image of the independent, self-sufficient woman who needs nothing. The fear that does not fit the image of the confident woman who moves through the world without doubt. All of it goes underground, into the shadow, where it does not disappear, where it operates in the specific patterns of relationships that seem to keep repeating the same dynamic with different faces. The same moment where something closes that should stay open. The same point where she finds herself smaller than she intended to be. Not because she is weak, because the thing driving her behavior in that moment is not her conscious self. It is the shadow, the unexamined wound, the unintegrated part. And until it is examined, until it is integrated, it will keep directing the most important interactions of her life, without her knowledge, without her permission, while she calls it bad luck, or the wrong men, or just the way things are. Here is what the difference looks like in practice. A woman who has not done the shadow work enters a relationship carrying her unexamined need. The need to be chosen, to be confirmed, to receive from the relationship the reassurance that she has not yet learned to provide for herself. And the relationship begins well. He shows up. He calls. He confirms. He provides the reassurance that feels like love, but is functioning as something else. External validation. And for a while, this works because the need is being fed, because the unexamined wound is receiving what it has been asking for. But needs are not finite. They grow in proportion to the amount they are fed externally, rather than healed internally. And at some point, the relationship cannot supply what is being demanded. And the demand increases. And the dynamic shifts from two people in a balanced connection to one person constantly managing the fragility of another. And the relationship begins to collapse under a weight that was never the relationship's to carry. Jung saw this pattern in patient after patient across decades of practice. And his prescription Was not. Find a better man. It was. Become a more integrated woman. Not because the men were faultless. Because the pattern that was keeping her in painful situations originated not in the men, but in the unexamined interior she brought into them. Now, what does this look like? When the work has been done. When a woman has gone inside, sat with the shadow, integrated what she found, and emerged from that process as something genuinely different from what went in. The need changes. Not the desire. The need. She still wants love. Still wants connection. Still wants partnership. These are human desires. And they do not disappear with psychological health. But the frantic quality of the need, the specific desperation that makes her available to situations that should not receive her availability, the willingness to shrink herself, to keep someone comfortable, the instinct to over-explain her value to someone who is not seeing it clearly. All of this quiets because the need that was driving it, the need for external confirmation of internal worth, has been met from inside. Not perfectly, not permanently, but enough. Enough that she can enter a room with a man and be genuinely present rather than performing, genuinely curious rather than monitoring, genuinely open rather than guarded against a pain she has not yet processed. And from that place, the words she uses are simply different. Because different words come from different places. And the words that come from a woman who is genuinely whole land differently than any other words a man will ever hear. Let us talk about the specific language, the actual words, the structure of the sentences. Because this is where theory becomes practice. And practice is what changes things. The woman who has not done the work speaks from the question that is always running beneath her words. Do you still want me? Am I enough? Are you going to leave? Even when she is not saying these things directly, they are present in the over-explanation, in the excessive softening of things that should be stated clearly, in the apology that attaches itself to things that require no apology, in the way she asks for what she needs, as if needing things is something she should apologize for. The woman who has done the work speaks from a different question. Does this align with what I know I deserve? Is this consistent with what I said I valued? Does this serve the life I am building? And the sentences that come from these questions sound completely different. Where the first woman says, I know you are busy, but if you get a chance, could you maybe let me know what is happening with us? I do not want to be a burden, but I just feel uncertain. The second woman says, something feels unclear between us. I value directness. What is actually happening here? The first is a plea. The second is a question. One comes from fear. One comes from clarity. And a man who encounters both in the same week will treat them completely differently. Not because he is cruel. Because the human nervous system responds differently to what it senses is desperate than to what it senses is secure. Security is respected. Desperation is managed. And no woman who is trying to build a genuine connection wants to be managed. Jung wrote, your vision will become clear only when you can look into your own heart. Who looks outside dreams. Who looks inside awakens. This is the distinction between the woman who is still dreaming about the man and the woman who has awakened to herself. The dreaming woman builds her hope around who he might become, what the relationship might feel like when he finally shows up the way she needs, when the potential she can clearly see in him becomes the reality she is actually experiencing. She is investing in a projection, in the version of him that lives in her mind, rather than the version that is showing up in her actual life. And every time the actual version does not match the projection, she finds a way to explain the gap. He is going through something. He is not ready yet. He will be different when circumstances improve. The woman who has awakened does not do this. She looks at what is actually here, not what could be here, not what was here once, for a brief beautiful moment that she has been trying to recreate. What is here today, in this interaction, in this pattern, in this consistent evidence of who this person actually is, rather than who they say they are. And she speaks accordingly, not to the potential, to the reality. I notice that what you say and what you do are frequently different. I value consistency. That is not an accusation. That is information. Information about herself, about what she values, and an invitation for him to either align with it or make a different choice about where he invests his time. Without drama, without pleading, without the performance of being hurt. That is actually the performance of being terrified that he might not choose her. Here is the hardest part, the part where the genuinely honest woman admits to herself what she has been doing in previous relationships. She has been performing her value because she was not certain she had it. She has been trying to be impressive because she was afraid of not being impressive enough. She has been overgiving because she believed that if she gave enough, the debt would never be called. She has been making herself endlessly available because she was terrified of what it would mean if he did not want what she was offering. All of this is painful to see. And most women encounter the shadow of this at some point in the quiet moments when the performance is down and the truth is visible. And the response is almost always the same. Push it down. Build the performance back up. Move forward without processing what was seen, because processing it requires sitting with the truth that the confidence she projects is not the confidence she has. And that gap between the projected confidence and the internal reality is where the shadow lives. And until it is closed, it will produce exactly the same relationship dynamics in the next relationship that it produced in the last. Different men. Same wound. Same moment. Where she becomes smaller than she intended. Jung called this the compulsion to repeat. The unconscious drive to recreate the original wound in new relationships until it is finally consciously processed and integrated. The only way out is through, and through means looking honestly at what she is carrying, what she is afraid of, what she needs, that she has not admitted she needs, and beginning slowly, patiently, to provide some of it for herself. Now let us talk about what this looks like in the actual moment when he does something that requires a response, not a theoretical response, an actual response in a real interaction with a real consequence. He disappears for 3 days. No explanation. then reappears. As if nothing happened. The woman who has not done the work has two options. And both of them cost her something. Option 1. She says nothing. She absorbs the behavior. She tells herself it is not a big deal. While something inside her notes the information and files it in the growing folder of things she has allowed. The folder that is slowly defining the floor of what she will accept. Option 2. She explodes. The accumulated silence of all the previous absorptions finds its release in this moment. And the response is disproportionate to the specific incident. Because it is not just about this incident. It is about all of them. And he experiences it as irrational, as too much. Even though the underlying truth it is expressing is completely reasonable. Neither of these options produces what she actually needs, which is a relationship where this behavior either stops or the information that it will not stop becomes clear to her so that she can make a different choice. The woman who has done the work has a third option. She waits until she is calm, not cold, not armored. Calm. And then she says, when you disappear without contact and return without acknowledging it, I feel the gap between us widen. I value steady presence. I want to understand if something is happening for you, or if this is a pattern I should make a decision about. This is not a script. This is what naturally emerges from someone who knows what she values, is not afraid to say it, and is genuinely open to either the relationship meeting it or the information that it will not. There is no performance in it, no manipulation, no attempt to provoke guilt, just clarity. And in the man who receives this kind of clarity, if he is capable of meeting it, something shifts. He feels seen and required and respected enough to be spoken to directly, and he either rises to it or he shows her clearly that he will not. And either outcome is useful, because clarity, however uncomfortable, is always more useful than the managed ambiguity that keeps a woman in a situation past the point when the truth was already available. Let us talk about standards versus demands, because this distinction, which seems simple on the surface, is actually the center of everything we are discussing. A demand says, you should do this, or there will be consequences. It is directed outward at the other person. It tries to control their behavior. It comes from fear, from the specific fear that if she does not force the outcome she needs will not materialize. A standard says, this is who I am, and this is what I require to be genuinely present in a relationship. It is directed inward at herself. It describes her reality, her values, her non-negotiables. It does not try to control the other person's behavior. It simply makes clear what she will and will not continue to be present for. The difference in the room, when each is spoken, is immeasurable. A demand activates resistance. Something in the receiving person wants to push back, to assert their own autonomy, to not be controlled. A standard activates something else. Respect. Or the clear information that respect is not possible here. And both outcomes are infinitely more useful than the chaos that demands produce. Jung understood this distinction through his clinical work with relationships. He observed that the women whose relationships produce the most genuine mutual respect, were almost never the ones who work the hardest to extract right behavior from their partners. They were the ones who had the clearest relationship with their own standards and the greatest willingness to let the men choose freely whether to meet them. The freedom in that, the genuine absence of manipulation, paradoxically produced more of what she wanted than any amount of strategic management could have. Because what genuinely free men, who are capable of genuine respect, actually respond to is not management. It is invitation. The invitation of someone who is clear about who she is, what she deserves, and is genuinely open to the right person showing up to meet it. Now let us go into something most people do not discuss with enough honesty: the specific way a woman of genuine worth handles the moment when he pulls away. This is the moment that reveals everything about her relationship with herself, about what she is actually carrying, about where the work has been done and where it has not. He was present. He was consistent. He was showing up in all the ways that felt meaningful. And then something shifted. His energy changed. The calls became less frequent, the responses slower, the quality of attention slightly more distant. And she felt it. Because women feel these shifts before they can name them. And the feeling activated something very old, very familiar. The specific fear that she is about to lose what she was just beginning to trust. The woman who has not done the shadow work responds to this fear in one of several ways, and all of them move her further from what she actually needs. She chases. She increases her availability, sends more messages, creates more opportunities for connection, hoping that the gap will close. If she bridges it, she shuts down, becomes cold and distant. As a protective mechanism, decides before he has left that she has left first. She performs. She becomes the most entertaining, most available, most impressive version of herself, hoping that the performance will recapture what she felt slipping away. All of these responses have one thing in common. They are organized around his approval, around managing his behavior, around preventing the outcome she most fears. And they all communicate the one thing she most needs to not communicate: that his staying is more important to her than her own integrity. The woman who has done the work does something entirely different. She notices the shift. She acknowledges it internally. And then she does the hardest thing available. She gives it space. Not as a strategy. Not as a technique for making him miss her. As the genuine expression of someone who is not organized around his response. Who has a life and a self and a relationship with her own interior that is sufficiently full that she does not need to collapse the moment his attention wavers. And if the shift continues, if it becomes clear that something has changed beyond the ordinary ebb of any relationship, she speaks once, clearly, without desperation. I have noticed something feels different between us. I want to give you space to be honest about where you are. And I am equally comfortable with your truth, whatever it is. That is all. No performance. No rehearsed speech. No attempt to make him feel guilty for whatever he is feeling. Just the clear expression of someone who is present, who has noticed what is real, and who values honesty enough to invite it, even when the honest answer might be difficult. That kind of sentence can only come from a woman who genuinely means it, who is genuinely okay with his honest answer, whatever it is. And she can only genuinely mean it if she has done enough work to know that his answer, whatever it is, does not determine her worth, does not confirm her fear, does not define what she is allowed to believe about herself. Her worth is settled inside, before any conversation, before any relationship, before any man has ever had the opportunity to confirm or deny it. It is simply hers. Carl Jung wrote, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate." This is perhaps the most important sentence in all of his writing for the women we are discussing today, because the patterns that keep repeating the same moment where she becomes smaller than she intended, the same dynamic with different faces, the same end of the same kind of relationship, for the same reasons she cannot quite articulate. These are not fate. They are unconscious patterns, driven by unexamined wounds, operating beneath awareness, producing outcomes that feel inevitable only because the programming beneath them has never been examined and deliberately updated. And the moment she sees this, the moment she looks directly at the pattern and acknowledges that it originates not in the men, but in the material she brings to every encounter with every man, something becomes possible that was not possible before. Change. Not the forced kind. Not the kind that requires vigilant management of every response, in every moment. The organic kind that happens naturally when the roots change, when the interior is different enough that different behavior emerges without effort, without strategy, without any particular technique for communicating more effectively. Because effectiveness is not a technique. It is an emanation. It comes from who you are, not from what you have learned to say. And who you are is built in the interior, in the private work, in the moments no one sees, where you are honest about what you are carrying, where you acknowledge what you have been avoiding, where you sit with the parts of yourself that do not fit the performance you have been giving, and you begin slowly, compassionately, without judgment, to integrate them. That is the work. And every woman who does it finds on the other side something she was looking for in every relationship she has ever had. Herself. Complete. No longer requiring external confirmation to stand up straight. No longer organized around whether he stays. No longer speaking from the trembling beneath that makes a statement into a plea. Just present, clear, rooted, and absolutely certain of something so fundamental that it cannot be shaken by any man's behavior, or any relationship's ending, or any moment where she is not chosen. Her worth is not conditional. It is not granted by love, not revoked by its absence. It is simply hers. Already. Now. Before the next sentence. And after the last. And when a woman lives from that truth, when it is not a belief she is working toward, but a reality she actually inhabits, the men around her feel it. before she speaks. And what they feel is not intimidation, not difficulty, not the quality of someone who is too much. What they feel is gravity, the specific pull of someone who is so fully themselves that being near them makes them want to be more fully themselves too. That is the gift of a woman who knows her worth, not just to herself, to every person who is fortunate enough to encounter her. Drop this in the comments if this opened something for you. I know my worth. Subscribe to Dark Stoic. Every week we go exactly this deep into the psychology that changes not just how you speak, but who you are when you speak it. This is only the beginning. Subscribe and begin the work that produces the voice no one ever forgets.